I graduated from nurses training in Toledo, and one of my classmates and I, after the war started, decided that we would volunteer and went and passed the tests, the examinations and so forth. However, it happened that my girlfriend didn't go with me. I had another friend that was working in the same hospital, Flower Hospital in Toledo, that was a few years older than I was, and we were sent to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky in 1942, in the fall of 42. This was a camp that was just opening, so we were there opening the hospital and opening ward after ward, and the patients were already beginning to come in, but they were just patients locally, you know. They were coming in with a surprise to me of measles and mumps and so forth, which I didn't expect when I went in the Army. Didn't even think about that. But it was very interesting. The whole camp was just opened, Camp Breckenridge. And I served there until, I think, over a year, and I received orders to be transferred out to California, Needles, California. And I was sure I was going to go to the Pacific coast. But we stayed in Needles for about 3 months, desert. It was very hot. We didn't have air conditioning. We had to go on marches in the sand on a hot day. And at night we would nearly freeze because it got so cold. And our buildings that we lived in were not very well made. There were spaces between the boards. Wow. So one of my friends and I would put our cots together and add our blankets below us and above us and make a double bed out of 2 cots so we'd keep warm at night, which was quite a change for us too. After we were there for about 3 months, we were sent to Oklahoma. And I don't recall just exactly how long I was stationed there in a hospital, taking care of patients who were on duty in the area. And I had gone, in the meantime, I forgot to mention that I had met my husband in Camp Breckenridge. We were married a year after I was in the service. And he had already been sent to New Jersey to get ready to go overseas. So I had gone on a leave to visit him because I didn't know when I would see him again. When I received a message from my group that I should return immediately because we were going to be leaving Oklahoma. So I got on a plane with a very severe cold, had a miserable flight, got to my station in Oklahoma, and the girls had already packed up all my belongings for me, and we went to Palm Springs, California, by train. These train trips were really something else.
What was so amazing about them? Or were they uncomfortable?
They were long.
They were long?
They stopped and let other trains go by. It took a long time to get anywhere on those trains. And we were there, I can't think of the name of the place, for only about 10 days. Anyway, staying in a beautiful hotel. We would go around the town and saw quite a few actors and actresses out there. And then we got on a train and went back to New Jersey. It was quite an experience.
So did you end up working in a hospital in San Diego or just looking at actors?
No. We were in Palm Springs for that
Palm
time,
Springs,
in a hotel, put up in a beautiful hotel I don't remember the name of. I'm getting too old to remember all these things. Anyway, we had a long train trip back to the east, and my husband was still stationed there, so we did get together a couple of times. But then we were put on a train again and taken to the New York to a ship. And we weren't allowed to tell anybody where we were going. Of course, we didn't know for sure. But when we got there, the Navy was saying goodbye to all their relatives. They were all there gathered and seeing them off. But we got on the ship. I had never seen the ocean before, and I was a little frightened. So it was at the evening. We all the girls in my cabin. I don't remember how many there were, but we were in bunks about 3 high in each place to take care of everybody that was going to be on that ship. And we didn't even get into our pajamas that night. We could feel the ship going, and we knew we were going out to sea. But we woke up in the morning, and we were still at dock. That was quite an experience. So after that, we weren't so afraid. But we had a very rough ride over on the Ile-de-France, which was a huge ship. We didn't have any accompaniment, and we were gone about 11 days, I think, on that trip.
When you say you had no accompaniment, it means there were no support ships or
that's right.
anything at all. You were by yourself on
by
the
ourselves,
yeah.
Scared to death. I had never seen the ocean before. But we got there okay, and we landed in Llandudno, Wales. And we were put out in homes with the people there who were very good to us all. And I remember we wondered why everybody looked so healthy. Their faces were just so red. And after we were stationed out in their homes for a while, we found out that they had very little heat and only had hot water for about an hour a day, and their faces were chapped.
Oh. Wow.
They all looked very, very healthy. With all that red, rosy cheeks, you know. Well, from there, we moved several times. Went from there to Scotland, and ended up in southern England.
At different hospitals?
At different hospitals. Yeah, we'd be there a while, and then we would send on to another place.
Now, were you finally treating soldiers now then?
Yes, we were seeing soldiers, and we were still a station hospital at that time, but we gradually were being separated from our own group and put into larger groups for general hospitals that they had set up in England or in Great Britain. And I finally was at Torquay, England, which is a southeastern part of England. It was a resort area. A very beautiful place, but we were out in the country.
How big a
And
hospital was that? Was that a big
It was a general hospital. I don't remember what the capacity was, but it was the largest hospital that they had during the war, you know. And I was there when we were stationed at that place when they started the war, and when our boys went into France.
D-Day.
D-Day.
So did you have
And I stayed there until the war was over. And my husband had already been sent over. He was sent into France the second day after D-Day, I think. He was with the intelligence. And he was originally from Czechoslovakia. He had come over as a teenager to visit his uncle and aunt, and then he was able to get citizenship, and he went into the service and served for our country.
Did he get a hold of you before he went in?
Yes. I had word from him that he was going, but I didn't hear from him again for a long time after that, which was not unusual. A lot of other nurses had the same situation, you know.
Were most of the nurses married, or were many of them
No,
single?
some of them were, but a lot of them had friends or relatives that were over there. And I stayed in Torquay till the war was over. My husband was stationed in Germany at that time, and he was. A group of us were. The original hospital that I was with was sent back to the States, and they thought they were going to go to the Pacific. However, they didn't have to, because by the time they got back, it had been stopped. And I was trying to get transferred to Germany so that I could be closer to my husband, because I still had time to serve. And I gradually did get to Paris, where I was supposed to get a job. I had applied for a job with the graveyard. They had some sort of arrangement. They needed a nurse, and I don't understand why, because I never did take the job. But by the time I got everything taken care of, it was time for me to be discharged. So I was discharged in Paris, and at that time my husband had also been discharged, and he took a job in the State Department at Bern, Switzerland, for the United States.
So did you move
So
to
we
Switzerland?
were there for a year.
What was life like post-war in Switzerland there?
Well, it was for us, it was very difficult to find a place to live. They seemed to be doing very well, and things were quite expensive in Switzerland, as they always are. We lived in a hotel until we were able to finally share an apartment with a woman who couldn't afford her apartment. And she used the kitchen and one bedroom, and we had the rest of the apartment. And it was on the 3rd or 4th floor, and the heating system was very poor. And you know, us Americans, we like to be warm. It gets very cold in Switzerland,
So you were in Geneva? Yeah.
No, Bern.
Oh, Bern.
Bern,
Oh,
Switzerland.
Okay.
Yes. And so I used to keep the oven going until I got word from the electric department that that wasn't a good idea. It was very expensive, so I stopped that.
When you were in Switzerland, did you get up in the mountains at all?
Yes, we used to, because my husband had relatives in Geneva, and we used to travel there frequently as we could to visit. His mother's sister and her children lived there, and we would go to visit them quite often.
Did he ever go back to
And-
Czechoslovakia after the
No,
war?
well, yes, he did. As a matter of fact, as soon as the war was declared over, he went into Czechoslovakia. He had permission to go in with a Jeep and his driver, and got his parents and his sister out of Czechoslovakia, and took them into Germany and found them a place to live there for a while, you know. And later on, we brought them to the States.
Well, that was a fortunate thing.
Yes,
He
it was.
That he could find them
And it
get
was
them
very
out.
scary for him, because the Russians were there.
Right.
Right.
And he had a good friend who, she was about his age, and she had her husband was just serving in the German army, and she had a little baby. So he took her to find some milk someplace, for food for the baby. And they were held by the Russians for a while. He told me about how they got through that. They kept giving them drinks to take all the time, and they had on boots, of course. He said they drank some, but then when they weren't looking, they'd pour in their boots what they didn't. Tried to, because they drank heavy, strong liquid. So it was quite something for him, too. I served in several different places in Great Britain, in Wales and Scotland and England and
then
in
all over
France.
In France and in
France.
Germany and everything.
France. I remember being in Verdun. It was the dullest place I have ever been in, I think.
Huh.
We lived right in town in a hotel, and there just wasn't anything going on in that town at all. And we used to say this is the city of the dead and the near dead.
Oh, gee.
Because they had a huge cemetery, you know,
Yeah.
from the First World War
Yeah.
there that we saw. And it was just a very sad place, I thought.
Yeah, must be difficult to be a city and around those huge cemeteries. It
Yeah,
would put a damper
yeah.
on life, I think.
Well, it was different for us. But we were there for a year, and then he resigned that job, and we came back to the United States.
Were you still in the armed services then? Were you still?
I wasn't. I was out,
You had
but
been-
he had his discharge, but he was in the
in
reserves,
the reserves.
and he got discharged.
So he was in intelligence the whole time during the war?
Yes.
And he was in France most of the time?
He was in France and in Luxembourg and in Germany, all the way through. He was in Luxembourg at the time they had, I forgot what it was called. They had a very bad time while he was there, I remember. But they had a name for it, which I can't remember. It's terrible when you get to be 88 and can't remember things, you know?
So you were in the hospital in the south of England.
Yes.
And were there many soldiers that came over?
Oh, yes, we had soldiers coming back regularly, and we never knew, you know, ahead of time how many would be coming, but they would be brought in because they would take care of them over in Europe as much as they could in the field hospitals, and then they would send them back to England to us. Of course, there were other hospitals in England too, but we got quite a few.
Did you get to talk to the soldiers some? Did you?
Oh yes, we took care of them, and we were just like working in any hospital. You were
Right.
busy all the time, and some would be there with measles and mumps and that sort of thing. Others were there very seriously injured, and they were doing surgery on them there, and a lot of them were sent back home, and some were sent back to duty. It was a wonderful experience, but very difficult to
Yeah, I can
see.
imagine, to see all of that.
and to think about and worry about what was happening to your husband and your
Right.
relatives that were there
Sure.
too. I had a brother who was serving in the Navy in the Pacific. My only brother. But he got home safely too.
That's,
Did that change your life quite a bit working there?
Oh, entirely. I mean, I saw, it did a lot of good for me. I got to see a lot of the world that I never would have seen. I saw quite a bit of Europe and Great Britain, and the United States for that matter, because I had never been out of Ohio, except I think we did make a trip once when I was a child to New York. That was about it.
Did that change
lived
your
on a farm.
perspective on the world some?
Well, yes, it's bound to. You don't realize how big and how different everything is. The difference between living in Europe and in the United States was something else
yeah.
for a farm girl.
For,
That's what I was.
When you were
How did you find your? When did you come to Charlevoix? Where did you live right after the war?
Well, there's a lot between
Not in
there.
between.
We were out for a while, and then my husband was in the reserves, and he would attend the meeting. We were living in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I was working in a hospital there. And he was working, and he would attend the meetings, and the man who was in charge of it was a good friend of ours, and he was trying to get nurses into the reserve. So I was the first one to sign up in Shreveport, Louisiana, which I found later was sort of a mistake, but in the meantime, my husband was sent to California Well, he was sent other places first, but he gradually got to California into the language school that they had there.
In Monterey?
Yes, beautiful town. We lived there for a year while he studied Russian. And then he, of course, was sent back to Europe. And just before he left for Europe, I was recalled into the service because I had joined the reserves. So I requested being sent to Europe, and I was sent to France. And I was stationed in France for a short while, and I got transferred to Germany, where he was stationed. And I worked in a hospital there, the same city where he was, and we were able to have an apartment together out in the settlement that was all for military.
Was this in late 40s or early 50s? When was he recalled?
This was in the 50s, early 50s.
Early 50s, around the time of Korea?
Yes. I was called back in 51, I think 51? It was. I've got the discharge.
So how long did you stay in Germany?
And I was there, I was on duty for 15 months, I think I had to be. And I got discharged again. And by that time, he was transferred to France. So we moved to France, and he finished his time there.
In Paris, or?
No.
South?
No, it was close to the ocean.
Normandy area? Oh.
No.
Okay, that's okay.
I have to look up I can't remember where it was.
But you stayed there for a
But
while?
we stayed there, yes, until his time was up. He was, by that time, he was working with the general. He was a general's aide. And he went wherever the general went.
So you had a pretty good experience of Europe then?
Yes, all my time was in Europe. Well, after I got through with being in service in the States, but...
Did you have one place that you preferred over another? France or Germany or Switzerland?
Well, they were all very interesting, you know, and since he had been from Czechoslovakia and had relatives in Germany and he had relatives in France, we traveled in both places, and it was very interesting, all of it to me. Of course, you just can't imagine the things that you see that you've never seen before, like the beautiful mountains and the homes, the way they were. And the towns were so much different. They have such narrow streets, and some places they had the barns and the house were right attached, and the cattle were right next to
the house.
Yes.
This doesn't smell very good.
And a little outside would be a stack of manure piled up very neatly, and above that they would be drying their tobacco leaves. I couldn't get used to that either. So you see a lot of different things when you travel that you never have seen before.
Sure, sure. You seem very much, you remember, damaged from the war during all your time?
Only after I got into Germany.
Germany?
Yeah, I didn't see too much in France because I didn't travel much there.
Okay.
But after I got over there, I had got out, I was able to travel around a little bit with him in the Jeep, and we saw quite a bit there.
So hast du gelernt ein bisschen Deutsch?
Pardon?
Hast du gelernt ein bisschen Deutsch von du warst ab Deutschland? Did you learn any German?
Did I buy any
Did you learn any German or French? Or?
Well, I got so... His parents, of course, spoke German and French, and I got so I could understand and speak to them.
Right.
But I've practically forgotten it all because you don't get to use it.
Yeah.
That's why I was practicing.
I couldn't hear you. So
yeah. So when did you come to Charlevoix? We were trying to get there.
Well, after we were discharged from there, we came to Charlevoix to visit my brother.
Oh.
He was working here in Kroger, store or
A&P?
Kroger, A&P, I don't know which one it was. He was working in the meat department. And
Small world.
Yes, it is. Yeah, the
yeah,
woman who-
they had moved up here. Well, he'd been working with this chain of stores. I don't remember which one it was. Anyway, he was transferred up here, and they had a home, and then actually they'd been here longer and had bought a farm and lived out in the country about 3 miles out of town. We came here to visit them, and my husband liked the area. Of course, it was summer when we were here. But it was cold in Europe too, you know, so he was accustomed to that. And he thought that his parents would like it better up here than they would in Shreveport, Louisiana, where we had a home there, and we had taken them there to live while we were back in Europe. And
Okay,
it's a very different climate down there
yeah.
than they were accustomed to. So we thought that they would enjoy this area better. However, his father, when we came back, I noticed that he was not doing well, and he died before we were able to get moved up here. He had developed cancer of the lungs and passed away. And then, of course, his mother didn't want to come. She and the daughter stayed in Shreveport for a while, and they later went to New York City to live.
Okay.
She liked the city.
She liked the city, hey?
But you moved up here.
But we bought the farm out here, and he thought he wanted to farm, but he soon found out you don't make a very good living on a farm by yourself.
Right.
So
So what did he do then?
he was still in the reserves, and he was called. He would go every so often and work in the reserves for several months at a time. And then he started teaching school in Bel Air. And he also taught in Interlaken for 3 years, taught languages there.
Which is there?
He spoke French, Spanish, and English, of course, and German
Russian?
and Russian, which he didn't use much after.
And what did you do?
I worked in well, I worked in the hospital here for quite a while. In fact, I retired from the hospital here in Charlevoix. And but before that, when we were in Interlaken, I worked in the little health center they had there for all the students that come. And our son was in school in Traverse City, in a Catholic school there. So I had to take him into school every day
Wow, that's a long trip.
and back from Interlaken. Well, it wasn't.
Oh, from
we were living
Interlaken.
in Interlaken at that time
Right.
Oh, okay.
when he was in grade school. We were there for 3 years, and then we came back to Charlevoix. And he finished school here. And my husband worked in Bel Air teaching, and I worked at the hospital here.
Have you enjoyed Charlotte?